Now, even though I'm a person that was born in the 90s and I started gaming in the early 2000s with the GameCube, one of the really cool things about the gaming industry is I feel like I like learning about gaming in the past. Like, I like learning where gaming started, when it started to become mainstream, how gaming came back after the infamous video game crash of 1983, and when the industry changed again when 3D came along with the likes of PlayStation taking down the Sega Saturn and the Nintendo 64 coming out with games like Super Mario 64 and Sin and Punishment. So even though, like, I wasn't born in the 80s, I still like learning about gaming from before I was born. And of course, one of the really big, pretty much the game company that brought, gaming into the mainstream and into the home was Atari, which they did that through game systems and games like Pong and the Atari VCS, which later became known as the 2600. And then when the video game crash hit, partially because of Atari due to a really bad port of Pac-Man and of course the infamous E.T., they kind of took a nosedive. And even when Nintendo and to some extent Sega brought the video game industry back, Atari couldn't prop themselves. They tried releasing systems like the 5200 with a god-awful controller, the 7800, which didn't offer any games better than what you could get on an NES. And then they had the Atari Jaguar, which was 64-bit, quote-unquote, and it acted more like a 16-bit system. And then after the Jaguar, Atari left the hardware race. They tried, kind of like Sega, they tried to break into the third-party gaming market, but even then, if you were to compare, even Sega, even though nowadays they're borderline on death's door, they've had much bigger success in the third-party market compared to Atari. And so now, something like 24 years after the Jaguar was discontinued, they're coming back with a new quote-unquote console, even though it's not, at least on paper, I don't consider it something that would compete with something like the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, or the Nintendo Switch. And you guys may have heard of it. It was their Atari Box console, and they're going to be showing it off at the Game Developers Conference, GDC, this week, and it's now going to be called the Atari VCS, which, as I said before, was the original name of the Atari 2600 console, which pretty much sparked the console gaming industry. I mean, yes, there were home gaming consoles before the 2600 with systems like the Magnavox Odyssey, which was actually the first one, and we can't forget that. But it was really the 2600 that made the idea of going out, buying a game at the store, popping the game cartridge into your console, playing it at home. That the 2600 made that sort of process mainstream. The Atari VCS, the new one, on the other hand, is excuse me, more like a souped up NES classic. Like, let me put it this way, it's kind of like if you put the NES classic, a Atari 2600, and a NVIDIA Shield in a blender. Like, the console itself is going to have some sort of AMD processor, so it's not just going to be like a mobile system on a chip like you would see in the NVIDIA Shield. It's going to have Radeon graphics and a Linux-based OS, none of which Atari specified. And the system is actually going to come with some Atari retro games, I'm assuming from the 2600 or some of Atari's classic arcade games. Games like Missile Command, Asteroids, Breakout, and games like that. And they also said that they're also going to be that other third-party developers can bring their own games to the to this Atari VCS system. And So, and the system was actually supposed to go up for pre-order back in December, but the pre-order date isn't. And I mean, sorry, Atari said that they will be announcing a pre-order date in April, which red flag right there. So, the fact that there's so little information, even from like a console launch, is really making me scratch my head. I mean, the first thing is that even when like a console, even in the first announcement when we don't know the most amount of details, they still at least give us an idea of what games they're gonna bring, you know? Like, like when they first unveiled the PS4, even though they never showed the console use, they still announced, hey, we're going to bring games like Killzone Shadowfall and Infamous Second Son. And, and this isn't like a system that's like a year or a couple years away from release. If they're going to be announcing a pre-order date in April, I'm assuming that this game is going to be coming, the VCS will be out maybe sometime, around E3, sometime around the June or July timeframe. I'm not sure if they're gonna like release it over the holidays. I don't think the VCS is gonna be that sort of really mainstream system where you need, a midnight launch and you need that sort of holiday sort of boost. Although with the way this system is going, we may not even see the VCS until the holidays. But if they are like saying, oh, we're gonna announce a pre-order date in April, I would expect the system to come out soon. And on top of that, if they are going to be including Atari like games with this console, could they at least give us an idea? Because so far, what we've seen from the announcement of the Atari VCS, and even when it was called the Atari Box, we mainly just got a promise of a system that looks like an Atari 2600, and now it's going to include two controllers. One that looks more like the Atari 2600 controller, with the joystick and the button, and then one that looks more like a conventional controller, which kind of reminds me of the Steam controller just from the design. So it's really hard to say because, Atari's being super vague about this system, and given that they're targeting the system as more of a retro console like the NES Classic, but it can play some games, like I'm expecting this system to be kind of more like an Android TV console rather than something like even the Nintendo Switch, If it was going to be that kind of a AAA console, I would have expected an announcement like, it would be interesting if Bethesda announced, hey, we're going to bring both Doom 2016 and the Doom from the mid-90s to this Atari VCS. Like, I feel like if they made that announcement, it would build such hype. But I don't even know if the VCS is going to offer, AAA titles like, the Dooms, the Skyrims, if you really want it, the Call of Duties and so forth. Like, I don't think it's that kind of a system. Although, the fact that it does have if it really does have an AMD processor, then it's fair to expect that it is going to be at least in the same league with something like a Nintendo Switch or the Nvidia Shield. So it's really hard to say. So, I mean, I just don't really know. And the fact that they, usually when they have to delay, a hardware system, it's usually a good thing because, it's usually a sign of, okay, we're going to improve the system. We're not just going to put it out there so we could make our shareholders happy. But the fact they're being Atari is being super vague about this, I'm really not sure. I mean, optimistically, I would think that it is going to be a sort of micro console where you could play both smartphone games and the classic Atari games. I mean, the one advantage something like this would have is I could play a lot of those games on my iPhone 7, but to be fair, you can't get a lot of the original Atari 2600 games on the iPhone. I don't see those available unless you want to go into the ROM community. So, and the fact that this thing costs between $250 and $300 is not giving me much more confidence. Again, like, even if it was going to be something like an Nvidia Shield, which that costs like $180, in comparison, you're going to be spending $100 more for a system that's probably going to be playing the same sort of games. So I'm really not sure about this. I would love to actually play some Atari 2600 games just to get my own sort of impression. But in the case of the Atari box, especially for that price, I'm really not sure, especially since, Atari's not even making it really clear. Is this going to be a system that plays AAA games, or is this going to be something like a micro console? If it's going to be a micro console, I may as well just be playing a lot of the games on my iPhone. And if it's going to be full console games, there's already systems like the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch, which have, really strong first-party supports. So why would I need to buy a, Atari box if most people already have a system or two that could already do what it does? Unless you just really need to play the classic Atari games. So with this kind of vagueness, it's really hard to say if I myself would be into the Atari VCS. And there's plenty of people out there that are speculating that this is going to be another Ouya. And in the case of the Ouya, that was a $100 system that played smartphone games. So it at least had the price right. Whereas with this, it's hard to say because $250, $300, unless Atari's coming out with really good first-party support, it's really hard to say if it's going to be worth that investment. Because for that price, you could probably go out there and buy like the PS4 Slim or the Xbox One S or the Nintendo Switch. So I just really don't know. Maybe when more information comes out and Atari gives us more information about the games, then I would have a lot more faith in this. But as of right now, I don't really know. I wish if this system is coming out, even if it's coming, if they were to delay it another year, I would at least like them to give us an idea of the kind of games we'd expect. Like, maybe not the final names, but if they at least tossed around a bunch of franchise names, then I would at least get some idea of what this thing will be. So, alright guys, this has been Blood Moon Bobby, and thanks for watching. Just got a bit of an update. I was looking through videos about the Atari VCS, and I heard that CNET had a few updates. And so the VCS will actually come with 100 classic titles, and a handful of reimagined Atari games are on the way. Also, new Netflix and YouTube are supposed to come to the VCS, which I could watch Netflix and YouTube on my iPhone, even though I don't think there's anything good that's worth watching on Netflix. And you can connect a mouse, keyboard, or a USB X input or Bluetooth controller, just like you can on a computer. Either I'm talking really funny right now, or these aren't free. This is why I wouldn't need to buy an Atari box, especially for a $250 or $300 price. And here's where it gets really interesting in terms of the horsepower. And so Atari at this point is considering whether or not to move to a newer, faster AMD processor than the Bristol Ridge AMD chip they originally planned to use, which, if this is a system that they're going to announce pre-orders for in April, is this console coming out soon if they're considering making hardware changes? Like, even if the Atari VCS isn't going to be competing with something like a PS4 and Xbox One, why? If they're going to change the processor, isn't that just going to delay it even more? Or is it a sign that Atari doesn't even know what they want from this console? And also, and this is the really scary part, they said they're not sure if Borderlands 2 for Linux can run on the Atari VCS, which, as you know, the VCS is a Linux-based system. Which, it could be software incompatibility reasons, but at the same time, Borderlands 2, a game that was released on the 7th generation consoles, I think even the Samsung Galaxy S9 could easily run a game like that in this day and age. So, yeah, these updates from CNET aren't giving me much confidence in the Atari VCS. Hey guys, this has been a Blood Moon Bobby video. Please like this video or dislike it, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.